Well, all right, people, let's rock and roll. It is time to get out in the garden. Now, I've entitled this Working Wednesday Walkabout. Wait, but hurry up gardening. And because I think it's going to seem contradictory, what I told you last week versus what I'm going to be talking about today. Things like pruning and feeding your roses, pruning and not so much feeding now, but pruning your boxwood, cutting back your perennials, fertilizing your grass, because last week, the last time we talked, it was still very cold and it was premature to do those things, but not anymore. So we're going to go through some things right now that you might want to hurry up and get done before spring explodes. And I don't know if last week I talked about roses, but even as the calendar isn't telling me that it's time to prune my roses, the plants, the garden, and the weather is telling me. So February is kind of acting like March, and the time to feed and prune your roses is when they begin to break dormancy. Normally, that isn't until sometime in March. But even though we had almost 0-degree temperatures now for the past, week and a half, Stuart, it's been 60s going into the 70s, and we don't even have another freeze on the horizon. And even then, it's maybe a light freeze for the next 14 days. So the first thing you want to do is look at your extended forecast and check to see how much above or below average you are. And right now our temperatures are running 15 to 16 degrees above average. In fact, I'm getting ready to take this coat off. Okay, so my roses. This is one of those beautiful roses. I will put a link to it. It is a gorgeous ivory. And if you look closely, Stuart, can you see right there? And right there?
Put your hand behind it, maybe?
Okay, let's see here. Okay. Right there.
Oh, yeah.
Can you see? Okay, that's bud break. So this is telling me that this is starting to put out new buds. Here you can see them really well up here. And I am going to start pruning these judiciously at this point. So I planted another one on the other side, and while they won't be 100% symmetrical, I kind of want them to be fairly close in stature. So this one I'm going to prune back some, and this one is also more established. So I'm going to do some light pruning, and I'm going to do this right above a bud, kind of on an angle. This is a shrub rose, so it's not quite so important as it is maybe on some other types of roses. But I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to prune it off. Actually, I'm going to come all the way down to that one. Okay, I'm going to do that throughout the bud. You guys don't have to stand here and throughout the plant. You guys don't have to stand here and watch me do this. Then the other thing I'm going to do is, where a little while ago I told you I wanted to keep these mold, and I wanted to keep these leaves on the perennials and on my different shrubs. Well, that is no longer the case. Now, I want to go ahead and start removing these leaves because temperatures have dead. Why? I try to always tell you guys why. Number one, because they're unsightly. The tulips are starting to come up, and I don't want the spring show to be ruined and diluted by having a lot of brown matter in the garden, or at least predominantly brown matter in the garden. So I want to remove it, first of all, for aesthetics. I also want to remove it because I want good air circulation down below and through the plant. Why? Because already as temperatures warm, I've often said in the South, there's only two seasons. There's before the heat and after the heat. And as soon as temperatures start warming up and it is humid, then that's when black spot and other kind of fungal diseases can really set in. So I want to kind of clean this out so there's much better air circulation down in here. I am removing any infected leaves that might have fungal problems like black spot. And I don't want them to then be the source of that black spot moving up into the plant. So I'm doing it for aesthetics, I'm doing it for the health of the plant, and I'm also wanting to make it more manageable for me to prune this back. Once I get it all cleaned up, yes, I am going to go ahead and fertilize. Typically, I don't do that till a little bit later. I'm actually going to wait till around the 15th, and I'm going to fertilize everything that it's time to fertilize, my grass, etc. What am I going to use? I like this Espoma Organic Rose Tone. So I will be using it on it and maybe some of the other flowering shrubs in my beds that it says it's appropriate to use if this is the time of year. So that is my number one thing. Hurry up and do it, because pretty soon this is going to be full of leaves and these jobs are going to be that much more difficult. Let's move on to the next thing. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is, you like me, plant tulip bulbs, speaking of tulips, in containers. And you've had them undercover. In this case, I had these in the garage. Last week, they were showing absolutely no sign of activity, but look now. As soon as you see that the tulips in your containers are starting to rear their pretty little heads, then you want to bring them out into the sun, into the warmth, and even into the rain. They've been undercover so that they wouldn't get too much moisture and the bulbs would rot. So not only are these bulbs starting to come up in the containers, and to get your containers in and out, by the way, one of these dollies is absolutely indispensable. Couldn't live without it. They're not only coming up in the pots, look here. They're starting to come up along the border of the grid. Now I'm going to come over here as I'm checking things out and get my 40 knife, because it's perfect for this kind of thing. So I want to remove any weeds, as I said earlier. You could do this at any time. I'm going to start removing more leaf litter. But in and around in here, I'm also going to check. I've actually already done some clipping on these, but I'm going to be cutting back some of my violas and some of my pansies. Now, I'm not prepared to display there. If I do want to demonstrate for you how I do this. So not only am I going to start cutting back my perennials, but yes, I am going to start cutting back some of my annuals that have gotten a little bit leggy, or they've got brown matter, brown leaves on them. And I'm going to cut them back. And then, yes, like my roses, I am going to fertilize them, but I'm going to clean them up first. And remember, pansies and other cool season annuals, like alyssum, like dianthus, like some kales, they like the cool weather. Snapdragons, they like the cool weather. So this is when we want to start encouraging them to put on new growth. Because again, we've only got 2 seasons and the heat will hit before we know it. Sadly, what that means is really we're starting to just not have much of a spring. And that's kind of a sad thing. So tend to your tulips. Do I feed them? This is kind of a practice that I have changed in the past. Do I feed them now? I used to encourage, as soon as there was bulb break, to put some kind of all-purpose bulb food on them. I don't do that any longer. It's an unnecessary expense and an unnecessary job, because those tulips have all they need in that small, wondrous little brown package. The other thing is, I don't rely on my tulips to come back again. So they have more than enough energy in the bulb to bloom beautifully. Now, if you have got some stands of, say, daffodils or muscari, hyacinths, and they have started to erupt, then those are bulbs that you're going to keep in the ground to naturalize. They'll come back year after year. When they rear their little heads, yes, you might want to fertilize them. But again, it's not absolutely necessary. That's kind of up to you. Now let's move on to the next job. Okay, while I'm in the vicinity of this rose plant, and by the way, you may ask, Linda, you're bouncing around from one place to the next. How do you know where to go? Well, I really try to be methodical about it. I'm demonstrating this, so I am moving kind of from one spot to another spot. But typically what I do is I eat that elephant one bite at a time, and I will take one area, and I'll show you an example of that. I'll take one area and one direction in the garden, and I will work on that, and then I'll work my way back. But for demonstration purposes, I'm kind of doing it out of order now. Now, in addition to cleaning up all of this leafy debris everywhere, not just around my roses, I'm doing it around my perennials, I'm doing it everywhere. And by the way, you're probably going to say, oh my goodness, Linda, your black garden truck is completely inadequate for this kind of leaf cleanup job. And I would agree. But remember, this is my first season of full spring here at the cottage with an established or semi-established garden. So I am now learning what kind of things I need for this garden space. Consequently, I just ordered 2 of those large collapsible, almost like garbage cans, but they're for leaf and debris cleanup. I just got 2 of them so that I can handle this kind of volume. I should get them today. Stuart, let's put up a picture of it so people will know what I'm talking about, and then I can collapse them and I can just keep them over here where I need it. Now, back to the garden. So in addition to cleaning up all of the leafy debris, and right now this isn't too prickly prohibitive. I could have used a little rake. But also I am starting to clean up that foliage on the agapanthus that was driving me crazy because it looked like it had just melted. Now, do I know whether or not these made it through those Arctic temperatures? I do not, but there's a good sign. When I pull on it, it is staying intact and in the ground. So that's a good sign that it means that hopefully those bulbs have not rotted. So that is a good sign. The other thing is I now want to remove the leaf. Let's go over here, Stuart, so I can show it a little bit more specifically. Here's another clump of it. Now in this area, I'm cleaning up not only the leaves, but I am going to cut back the foliage. Why am I doing that? Okay, so because it's time, and I don't want this as for aesthetics, and I don't want this to look ugly, but I am also wanting to encourage it. If it is still alive, I want to see evidence of that. But the other thing is, one of the reasons we mulch is to hold in moisture, especially if it's windy and there are drying conditions. But right now, it has been very wet for us. We have had consistent slow moisture over a number of days, so much so that this ground is probably still too wet for dig in. But I am removing not only the foliage and the leaves from on top of the agapanthus to make it look tidy, but I'm also doing it because it's holding in that moisture, and I don't want those roots to rot. And so because these like really good drainage and on the dry side. So I am removing this so they can start to dry out, and that will help me determine whether or not they are alive or really most sincerely dead. Moving over here to a biennial foxglove, I kept, or actually this is a salvia. The same would hold true if it were a foxglove. This is a perennial. I left some of the branches on there and some of the seed heads for the birds and the pollinators, but now I'm going to remove this to expose that pretty rosette of green, and also so that I know that this is here. This is only the first spring of this garden. I'm still getting familiar with what plants are where. So this will help me identify the location of certain plants. I'll also be on the lookout for any kind of pests like snails or roly-polies or things like that, and see if I have to address them. So my perennials, my agapanthus, my roses, yes, I am starting to prune on them and cutting back the dead foliage. Now, while I'm down here, I am also going to clear out anything that I see. And where you going? Surprise, surprise. That's an allium. That is an allium bulb right here. I kind of had forgotten where I planted them because I was a bad gardener and I did not mark it. But how fun is that? Now I know where it is. I will also, another reason to start removing the debris is because you need to know, even though I've got stepping stones, I need to know where I can walk and where I can't walk. So Stuart, be careful so that we don't squish any tender little bulbs that are starting to erupt from the soil. Now let's move on to the next step. Okay, my next project. By the way, absolutely an indispensable garden tool if you want to request one for Valentine's Day. This little Works lightweight blower. It's great for getting underneath in crevices and things. I love it so much that I've got one for the front and the back. Like I used to have. Little indulgence. Okay, so something exciting is getting ready to cook it, which falls into the category of know thy garden and know what's going on. So what's going on here is that, hallelujah, I am going to get my railings up pretty soon.
Okay, this is an unexpected surprise. I didn't know these guys were coming today. Juan and David or Michael are here and they're installing my new railings. And as you can see, I did decide to get the railings on both sides. So I can't wait to see how they look when they're finished. And apparently they're doing the back as well. So definitely this will perk me up despite the gardens looking so barren. So, Michael, I just asked you a stupid question, but there are no stupid questions, are there?
No, there are not.
So, these posts look really tall.
Uh-huh.
And I asked if surely the railing wasn't going to be that tall, and you said...
No, so we usually make them long so that way we can cut them shorter out in the field.
Yeah.
We have a standard height of about 36 inches.
Okay.
So we'll end up cutting them down to about 36.
Okay.
They're about 40 inches now.
And so today you guys are just putting in the framework?
Pretty much a template, yes.
Okay, and then the railings and everything will come next week, probably.
Yes.
And will, again, another stupid question, will these supports stay in place or will you take them with you as well?
So these posts?
Uh-huh.
So those will all be coming out with us. We'll take it back today.
Okay.
And then we'll put the design in it and bring it back painted and finished.
Okay. So right now we're just establishing where they're going to go so that you can just plop them in once you get
so
here.
once we bring it back, it'll go right back in how we took it out.
Okay. Happy Valentine's Day to me, right?
Of course. Let's see.
So now the guys are going to start working on the back steps, and I'm kind of sad because I have a wonderful hawk that is sitting in one of the cedar trees in my backyard, and it's been there all morning, but I fear that the noise will scare it away. Once they get this done and the railings are in, I'll begin staging my topiaries and evergreens up and down the steps.
So Stuart, look, they came to set a template. They drilled some introductory holes right here on both sides. They did this in the front, in the back. Then while I've got the framework, then they'll go back and they will put the slats and the different posts, etc., in the railings, and I'll be able to install them. A little bit late for my book because now that we're past ice and snow season, but hey, I'm not looking a gift horse in
ready for next year yet.
Okay, so what does that tell me? This is kind of falls into common sense garden. That if I'm going to start pruning my boxwood, I probably want to start with these. Why? Because when that railing is in place, it's going to be really hard for me to push through that railing to get to them on this side. Now, ultimately, I'll have to figure that out. But right now, while I am happy to do any kind of gardening, I am going to go ahead and start pruning on these boxwood. Now, I'm still a little bit nervous about it because, yes, we could get a cold blast. But if that's the case, pretty soon, this boxwood is going to start putting out new shoots regardless. And if it's not tempered, I'm going to have to, not tempered to the cold, I'm going to have to prune it off anyway. So I want these to look a lot better. So you can see, if you go back and look at my video from last week, you could see how ugly this one was. And so I pruned off all of that dead. And by the way, I'll be talking about topiary this week, but these in the front, while they look like just global spheres right now, typically these are going to be kind of globes, but they're going to be a lot fluffier. Right now, they look far more severe simply because I'm doing some pruning. So, in terms of my tackling one area at a time until it's starting to get windy, this is the first area that I'm tackling. Again, because I've got the railings coming in, but also because I've got lots of tulips in here that are starting to show up, and because these pansies are the ones that are going to come out first because I face south and they're going to get the most sun. So I have already kind of clipped off the dead foliage. I have deadheaded them. I have cut them back. I'm going to do a little bit of light pruning on these, which, by the way, will clip off a little bit of that bronzing, but it's just going to maintain their shape. And no, I do not have a tarp under this because I wanted you guys to kind of see the context in which I was working, and I'm only doing light pruning. I also pruned this one above. Now, I'm keeping in mind as I prune them. And by the way, I love both my barnail pruners, which I've told you about ad nauseum. Sometimes they can be hard to find. These are right along with those, the barnail pruners. These are Okasuni long-bladed pruners. I absolutely love them. They're a little bit sturdier than the barnails for when I'm pruning things that tend to be a little bit woodier. I also, if you ask me for handheld pruners, I also think they make some of the best, though I have a million different kinds, I think they make some of the best hand pruners for cutting things back. So, Stuart, can you kind of see how these here differ from those over there? And then this is the last one that I have to prune.
I can't even sound like
Yeah.
that.
So I want to show you how I do this. This is a baby gem boxwood, one of the southern living plants. And if this foliage were diseased or I was concerned about it, I would definitely have a tarp under here. But also the other thing is, unlike my potager at the other house, this is on an angle. So it's easy for me to kind of clean these up because I can just gently flow them off. And they literally blow down to earth. Okay, so over here, Stuart, let me show you this. So you see here that this is an example of just winter burn. So I'm going to kind of prune that off. I can kind of go a little bit deep like that because these have a pointy tip on them.
Still pretty precise.
Pretty precise. And the thing is that once the new foliage begins to come out, it will hide any abrasions that I've made. So I don't even have to worry about being extremely particular about getting rid of all the dead wood. The other thing is sometimes, not right now, but later in the season, I might go in here and do some stem pruning by actually going down into the boxwood and cutting out stems. So it creates some openings like that. So light gets down into the center, which helps prevent fungal disease and also prevents or also encourages growth deep into the plant so that I just don't have a shell or a veneer of foliage on the outside, but it doesn't go deep. So there you go. This didn't take too long. Again, these, I'm not worried about perfect spheres here. I'm just worried about worrying about, actually, I'm not even worrying about it. I just want an approximation of a globular. So I now am going to I'll clean this up, and then I will give these pansies a feed of some kind of quick release liquid fertilizer. Usually I garden organically, but just for my pansies and things and my container plantings, I will use Miracle Grow because it's kind of like a huge dose of caffeine to wake them up and get them going so that they are beautiful in their short lifespan here in Oklahoma. So I will be doing that soon, again on my fertilization day, once I clean up all of the debris and I feel like it is receptive to that kind of attention. Okay, let's go on to some other things. Okay, so now you're going to ask me, what about things like my butterfly bushes, my hydrangeas? And yes, you can start pruning on them, on the hydrangeas only if they bloom on new wood. If they are some of the old-fashioned varieties that bloom on old wood, heavens no, do not prune on them. Do not prune on your azaleas. Do not prune on your forsythia. Do not prune on any of your spring bloomers because you'll prune off all of the blooms. Now, a tip. I know that I've got some guys who are going to come and they're going to really do some monumental cleanup to help me with all of the leaves. Note to self, I need to not make
I'm finding it over and over again.
obstacle course. I've got all my stuff all out. All
I
over
thought
the
I'd
place.
miss it every time.
This is the tip. I've got some people coming to help me clean up a lot of the leaves and things like that. So I am going to do a lot of this clipping now, and I can kind of leave it in place knowing that they're going to come back and clean it up later. That saves me a lot of physical labor. I'm willing to do a lot, but I can't do it all. And that saves me some physical labor. They can clean it up when they come, so I'm going to do it right now. Secondly, speaking of physical labor, it is now just getting to be gardening season, and I promise you guys, I do this every morning. I do these stretches before I even get out of the bed because the last thing I want to do is cause myself bodily harm or injure myself just as gardening season is starting to come around. So I will stretch my calves. I will stretch my arms. Because I have golfer's elbow, I now am stretching my forearms. I am doing all sorts of stretches for my back, for my glutes, for my hamstrings, so that they are warmed up before I go out and garden, because gardening is exercise. Don't forget, gardening is exercise, and you need to prepare for it. The other thing is, if you're going out to garden and you know that you are really going to suffer by the end of the day, and as we get older that happens, then take some preemptive measures. If you need it, go ahead and take some ibuprofen or something so that it will help with the inflammation that sometimes gardening causes. Okay, back to my butterfly bushes and my hydrangeas. So I've got some of this wonderful butterfly candy here. And I really want to, and obviously this put on tremendous growth last year. It was one of my favorite things in the garden, not only because it was a wonderful pollinator, but because it bloomed in some of my favorite colors in white and blue and lavender, and I love it. So I know it's going to grow very rapidly, so I want to prune to control its size, and also because I want to cut off some of the stuff that's unsightly. Now at the top, it may look like it's just dead and it didn't make it, but I promise you it did. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to start pruning. I've got some sharp, just hand bypass pruners, and see where I'm pruning right here? Kind of in between those nodes. I could go down even further if I so chose. And I'm doing this to kind of, again, clean it up, make it look more attractive. And so I'm going to be cleaning up all of the leaf litter that's underneath this, and it's not easy to do. Galley for all of these scratches. So again, it calls it to be satisfying of common sense gardening. Then it makes me happy because look there, Stuart. All of my mulching was worth it because look at all of that new growth that's down there.
And he's like, see,
Isn't it wonderful? Yeah, I might cut it back even further because now it's established. So that is something.
there goes all the coffee.
There is. Stuart just spilled my coffee that I left out right there. Sorry, Stuart. That's it. But this is life. This is
life. This is amazing.
so I'm going to continue pruning on all of these this entire span. This makes pretty quick work, especially if I've got a cleanup crew and after me. But it makes me so happy to see that indeed these butterfly bushes sailed through these cold temperatures and will be beautiful this coming summer. Okay, one last thing, and then we're going to move on. Okay, lastly, I'm going to talk about my window box. So you may recall that it was very, very overblown, overgrown in a way that actually I liked. A lot of you didn't like it, but I really liked it. But now it's kind of back to its bare bones, to the elements, and what I have planted in here is starting to come forth. Now, before I do much else, I am going to tend the structure of the window box itself. So there's been a little bit of separation at some of the seams. There's some areas that need to be caulked, some areas that need some touch-up paint. And Kayla will be on the mark to do that. We've already discussed it. Sadly, I did determine that the pineapple guava really was most sincerely dead. And it had the right to die because it got down to 0 degrees. And it's a tropical and wasn't really meant to be there. But I decided to give it a go, and I am learning. I am starting to prune on the Irish mint euonymus in here. And I obviously now, when I stand back at the street, I am noticing that I need more visual weight up here than is currently provided by this euonymus. And I will get it. It will just take some time. Why? Because I planted probably, I don't know, maybe 75 tulip bulbs in here. And you can see them starting to come up. Actually, these were the first bulbs that started to come up. And why I am typically successful, unlike planting bulbs in really, really heavy, like concrete containers that are too heavy for me to move inside, while I'm typically successful in leaving tulips in place in window boxes, even though they're a container and I don't want them to get too wet, is because there's an overhang. And so they don't get prohibitively soggy so that the tulips will turn into mush. But they are all starting to erupt now. They will get to be about this tall. It will be simply spectacular.
How tall have you been? Sorry, I was pointing up.
Yeah, they'll get to be about this tall, and it will be spectacular, and I'll have that drama that I am wanting here. The other thing that will start filling in is all of the violas and the pansies, the violas and the pansies and the ajuga that I planted in here, some variegated ajuga, which will start growing up and over and creeping over the sides. So one thing I have noticed is that there's been a little bit of frost heave, and what that means is that some of the violas, probably also because of the erupting bulbs, are starting to eject from the soil a little bit. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to top dress this with about 1 inch of compost. And then I'm going to give all of these guys a really good liquid feed because these will come out before you know it. It was also a priority for me to go ahead and clip and groom all of these annuals in here because I know that this is going to be one of the very first things that starts to show and look beautiful. And I don't want it to be here at a prominent location looking less than its best. Another thing that you can go ahead and start doing right now, especially before these guys get very, very busy, is start checking on your irrigation system and your zones, because it's much easier for them to come out now than it will be later when it's a lot warmer and their phones are ringing off the hook. So I am going to assess, as I'm working in the garden, the reliability and really the efficacy of my sprinkler system in general. How well is it working for me? Do I need to add more of these drip heads in my window box? Do I need to take some of them out? Do I need to add another head in my flower bed somewhere? Much easier to do now while the garden is relatively barren of all of its growth than it will be when they have to navigate through all of those leaves, the underbrush, etc. So that's another thing that you might want to think about doing now. So I know you're probably saying, wait, Linda, wait, you told me last week not to do these things, and now you're telling me to do these things. Well, yes. First of all, you wait, and then you hurry up, because that's the nature of spring, at least in the South, probably all around the country right now. So pay attention to what is really going on, pay attention to common sense, and pay attention to what your own garden is telling you as you proceed with your garden chores. Now, my garden work for the day is not complete until I record what I have done for the first time in my garden journal. So I'm began pruning roses, buddleia, boxwood, and then I can compare one year to the next to see if in the future this will be about the right time, or, oh my goodness, last year I did it a lot earlier, this year I did it a lot later. The other thing that I'm going to start recording pretty soon as I get to it, is all of my backyard chores that I need to do. Of course, I'll bring you along for that ride, because pretty soon it's going to be time to start planting my lettuces, my cool weather greens, my cool weather brassicas if I'm going to plant them, carrots, peas, etc. But all of that, I want to make sure that I record in my garden journal. And yes, mine is starting to get nice and dirty and get just the patina I want, because typically when I'm writing in it, it is right out here in the garden itself, before I forget and before I procrastinate. A couple of other things to give you a heads up on. I'm getting ready to go in right now and do a podcast with my buddy Leslie Harris in Charlottesville, Virginia, and we're going to be talking about gardening, my garden journal, some other things, but also give you a heads up that I am doing 2 home and garden shows this year. So if you want to come out and see me, meet me, then by all means, please come. I'm going to be in the Indianapolis area for the Flower and Patio Show at the Indianapolis Fairgrounds. It runs, I think, for 2 weeks, but I'm going to be there on the 16th and the 17th making a presentation, signing books, answering questions, and hopefully meeting some of you guys, in addition to visiting with family while I'm there. And then also I'm going to be doing the Oklahoma City Home and Garden Show. I believe that's the 24th and the 25th. I'll be giving you more heads up about those things. But if you are in the area, I would love to meet you. Please, please come and see me, introduce yourself, and we can talk all things gardening. So there you go. That is a whack and wild and Wednesday, but very much a working Wednesday walkabout.